You're live, Chairman. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to this Strategy and Resources Committee meeting on Thursday the 20th of November 2025. My name is Councillor John Driver and I am the chair of this committee. Members, we are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting you are giving your consent to being recorded. During each item, please put your hand up to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Could I ask members to avoid approaching the top table, as this could create interference with the cameras and live stream. Please note that the YouTube live stream sound recording is dependent on the correct use of microphones. Therefore, can I ask that when you're invited to speak, you remember to turn on your microphone and turn it off when finished. Please reference a page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers, and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. We do not have any fire alarm testing schedules for today. However, we may have periodic fire alarms, and I remind members to ensure they sign in and out when entering the council offices. If you hear the fire alarm, please exit using either of the two marked escape routes. Once out of the building, please proceed to the designated muster point located on the grass verge by the police station entrance. Okay, on to apologies for absence. Clerk, if we could have that, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies been received from Councillor Burrell-Cook and Councillor Durham, and Councillor Pratt is attending as a substitute for Councillor Durham.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. On to agenda item 3, then minutes. It is recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on Thursday, the 2nd of October, found on pages 5 to 14 are approved as a true and accurate record. I so move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stilts. Can we agree by assent? Thank you very much, members. On to agenda item 4, then, declarations of interest. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests relating to items of business on the agenda having regard to paragraph 9 and appendix B of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interest as soon as they become aware, should the need arise, throughout the meeting. Are there any disclosures? Councillor Lake.
Thank you, Chairman. I think item 11, I am a member of Maldon Town Council, serving councillor. I would seek guidance whether I should participate or not, or leave the room during that item.
Thank you, Councillor. Is that the Maldon allotment?
Yes.
Yes, the Maldon allotment.
Unless you have, you're an allotment holder and there is some financial interest for you personally as a town councillor, you can remain.
Can
unless you feel otherwise.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Can I participate in the discussion and vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would also disclose the same, being Mayor of Maldon Town Council, so I would declare the same issue, and thanks for the clarification. So we will be able to participate. Any other declarations? No? Okay, we move on then. Agenda item 5, public participation. I can advise that we have not received any submissions from members of the public. So we can move on. So we move on to agenda item 6, half-yearly Treasury management update. This can be found on pages 15 to 26. And I'll hand over to the Director of Finance, Mr. Jay, to give the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly to introduce the report. This confirms the position between April and September, end of September, arising from the February 25 approval by full council of the Treasury Management Strategy, as it notes in the report in section 3.1. The average on hand is noted in table 1 on page 16 of the agenda pack, It started in April at 19.2 million and by 30th of September had grown to 24.2 million. This increase was expected, planned for, and it relates to the timing principle of council tax receipts into the council. The expected returns in the year have increased from the budgeted amount estimated at the time of setting the budget, largely due to both the changes in the global economic position and interest rates, but also to do with the overall balances that have been available being slightly higher than previously anticipated. The important part around this is that this is all in line with the Treasury management strategy as previously agreed by members, and is also in line with sectoral best practice. A further report will be provided in the usual way at the end of the year with the outturn on the year's Treasury management activities. Those are the key points I wanted to raise, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Okay, any questions for Mr. J? Mr. Pratt, Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Chairman. Liquidity. I noticed it's mentioned we seem to have an awful lot of cash surplus. Could the officer just explain, should we be investing that and should we still have sort of 12, 13 million, it appears, cash in hand when we only need 3? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for the question. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
To explain, when we refer to liquidity, we don't mean that we've got it in the office somewhere. The cash is available in different ways. For example, surpluses held at the end of the day can be invested overnight on money market funds, other similar products. I think we often refer to them as instruments through which we can invest. Those are detailed and specified within the Treasury management strategy. We don't hold in excess of 20 million on hand. By working with the projected cash flows that we require for the coming weeks and months, we're able to identify where sometimes an amount of cash can be placed and invested with a different counterparty, possibly a local authority, possibly a bank in line with money market funds, those sorts of things. There's a range of different criteria through which we identify how to do that safely. Liquidity is important. It's the second of 3 that we work with. The most important is security. The liquidity is then planned in line with cash flows, and then the yield is the last consideration. So we will bear that in mind lastly. Overall, the actual amount that's sitting in our bank account will be substantially less than the amount shown in the report because of the way that we make those investments for different durations with different counterparties. I hope that clarifies.
Good answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any others? No. So I will go to their recommendation, and the recommendation can be found on page 15. That members note the Treasury management report for compliance purposes. Are you happy to note? Noted. Thank you very much. We move on to agenda item 7, Rural Settlement List 26-27. This can be found on pages 27 to 30. And again, Mr. J, it's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is in many ways an administrative process. It enables currently about 5 businesses to secure rural business rate relief. They secure a benefit in total across those different businesses of about 15,000, which is funded by government. It's not funded through the council. We need to submit the details of the rural settlements to government as set out in the report in order to ensure that those businesses can continue to seek those benefits, and if any other businesses are also eligible, we're then able to apply the same benefits to them as well. And without this registration, those reliefs aren't available to those businesses. The details of the settlement, I understand from colleagues, the settlements and the naming of the settlements has been occasionally contentious in the past. However, the process itself we know works. So if members will bear with on some of the bureaucracy, we are obliged to work with government on some of these. Updating some of the names doesn't really change exactly who gets what. It's the businesses themselves and making sure that the area is registered as being a rural settlement. I hope that makes sense, and happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. Aren't Mayland and Maylandsea normally on this list? They usually are, but I can't find them
Jane.
anywhere. They used to be lumped together and now they're not even on separately. Thank you.
We have gone through that list, and I'm just trying to recall the exact answer to that question. I know a colleague did give that. I can double check that before any kind of submission is made to ensure that the list is complete. It is complete to the best of my knowledge at this point.
If I may assist, Chair.
Oh, Councillor Pratt and then
Last year
Councillor
we
Fitzick.
merged the two, which took them out of the parameters for business rate help, which was a long, lengthy debate. But yes, by merging them, which I often wonder whether Hawthorne, North and South are due to have that axe fall upon them. But I see they've escaped yet another year. But yes, it was a merger we did last year, and as a consequence, they're no longer on this list.
Thank you. Councillor Fitzick.
I was just going to say this is only villages and that are under 3,000, Mayland C and Mayland are over 3,000.
Okay, any other questions? No, then I will go to the recommendation, which can be found on page 27. The recommendation that the rural settlement list attached as at Appendix A be approved. I so move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stilts, thank you. Can we agree by assent? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, we move on. So agenda item 8 then, budget monitoring report, quarter 2. This report can be found on pages 31 to 44. Mr. J is having a busy night, so over to you again, Mr. J.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the baton as you pass it, if I may. So in terms of business, the budget monitoring report for quarter 2, similarly to the Treasury management report, which reports on the position of the council at the end of the first half of the year, the end of the second quarter. The details of the report are set out, and the recommendations can be seen. Just to take the committee quickly through some of the key points there. The current position for the revenue budget, looking at particularly the service areas of the revenue budget, is slightly under about 0.5% or 67,000. What this is telling us is that the operations of the council are being managed effectively by the budget managers and within the parameters set out and agreed by councillors in the February meeting to set the budget. The forecast investment income, however, has been higher than anticipated, as mentioned in the earlier agenda item around Treasury management, and we're seeing some improvement in the overall financing position of the council outside of the operational areas of the council. In terms of the capital investments in the year, which are noted in particular the recommendations at 2.3, the forecast capital outturn is showing that the capital programme delivery of 5.2 million, I think the comma, that's correct, sorry, 5.2 million, 5,234,000 K. Yeah, I'm tripping myself up, start again. Against the revised budget of 6.5 million, which is set there. The delay there in the spending is relating to the investment works planned for Blackwater Leisure Centre. Prudently, the budget that was set at the start of the year assumed that some of that investment would be coming through early on in the year. However, further discussion with the contractors, with Places Leisure, have identified a updated and preferable delivery profile. The scheme itself will be the same, but some of it will be delivered in the current year and some of it will be delivered in the coming year, and hence the split, and hence also the reason why there is some additional cash held on hand by the authority, which is supporting the investment returns, which are higher than anticipated. In terms of the other points around there, it's worth noting, particularly in Appendix 3, which is on page 39 of the agenda packs, the proposal to move 70,000 from the transformation reserve to fund investment in the digitisation and improved software and other systems to help manage the cemetery's position. This is important because it helps to support a key area, both for residents in terms of bereavement services, but there are also fees and charges type incomes which are derived in those areas, and better management of that through these types of investments will help to secure some of that going into the future. There is then at 2.5 and Appendix 4 movements in the reserves which are set out arising in the year to date, which are positive. I think the overall position there, earmarked and general reserves taken together of 15.2 million at the start of the year, an anticipated position at the end of the year of 14.5 million based on the latest results, a net use of reserves of 684,000, largely due to contributions relating to preparations around reorganisation and some of the costs associated through that, and also the local delivery plan and supporting some of the delivery as previously anticipated around those areas. Those are the key points, I think, relating to all of that. I think the only other point I would raise is that, as many of the committee will be aware, there's been a change in the structure of the council arising from the restructure work which had been led through by the Chief Exec. The current report which you're considering is based on the previous, as the new arrangements came into place in the middle of October. So this report takes us up to 30th of September. Future reports will be related in line with the new director structure that's been implemented. I think those are the key points. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Then it's Councillor Lagan and then Councillor Fiddick. Councillor Lagan.
I'll give way to Councillor Fittick.
Okay, Councillor Fiddick.
Just a question to Mr. Day on the pensions. There's £240,000 in there for triennial valuation. I thought that had been set to zero now.
In which area? Sorry.
In the capital reserves. Page 41. It's got service delivery triennial pensions payment, £240,000 in earmarked. So it's Appendix 4 at the bottom, page 41.
Indeed, that's a drafting error. We can correct that. The amount is being confirmed as part of the 2025 triennial valuation has been no longer required, as the gap, which was previously identified 2 valuations ago in 2019, has now been effectively closed.
Thank you.
Councillor Lagan.
Thank you very much indeed. It's to do with environments and budget amendments on Appendix 3. And it seems to me the first one, there's 4 of them that you've requested there. Well, the first one, 32,000. That seems to be a cost that we would have to take. But the other 3 seems to be costs where there hasn't been sufficient budgetary provision made. So when you're talking of the amphitheatre, which seems to be a great big hole in the ground that just has been sucking in money since we started to refurbish that. There's another 12,000, which we didn't equate for. Then we had a small variance, which I find hard to believe, of a 3k with the sums of money that we're talking about with roof safety down at the leisure centre, and then 7k for curbstones. They might be smallish amounts in the grand scheme of things, but I have a concern that these things don't seem to be budgeted with sufficient capacity for additional costs coming in, and we have to move money, which is a continuing saga across the council for the many years I've been on here. So it's just a concern, really.
Mr. J, do you want to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lagan. I think whether or not it's a continuing saga, it's not something I can easily comment on because I haven't started sufficiently long ago to have that depth of knowledge. But I have seen quite a lot of this, and you'll probably be pleased to hear that this has been an important part of the conversation with the Finance Working Group. Therefore, part of the work that I'm doing with the finance team, with officers across the council, is trying to reduce these changes as much as possible. Some of the ways we're doing that, and again, I refer back to the work of the Finance Working Group, which has been very supportive in this matter, making sure that we do have sufficient contingency built into the different schemes. Also, where the nature of schemes becomes clear to be different early on in the scheme from the actual position which it was believed to be an amphitheatre, I think was unfortunate in that regard. Once the ground was opened, it was quite clear that there was quite a lot more work that needed to be done than was previously anticipated. That information came through later on than perhaps it could have done, so the timeliness of the reporting around it. But I think over the coming reports, I'm hopeful that councillors will see less of this as we seek to build through a process of planning for contingencies, such that we don't need to pick up so many of these so frequently. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, so the recommendations then, there are a few of them, can be found on page 31. I'll read through these. So, little 1 notes the forecast revenue outturn as at the 30th of September 2025 is 67k under budget. That's 0.5% against the net service budget of 13,787k. Further information can be found at Appendix A, along with the reasons for significant variances. Little 2 notes that additional interest income of 231k is forecast due to delayed capital expenditure. As a result, the surplus will be transferred to the earmarked reserve. Little 3 considers the forecast capital outturn as at the 30th of September 2025, which is for a total capital programme delivery of 5,234k against revised budget of 6,550k. Further information again can be found. No, it's K. It's 6,550k. So that will be all right. So it's just the way which it's written, but it is correct. It's correct. Further information can be found at Appendix 2 along with reasons for significant variances. Little 4 approves the environments and budget amendments as set out in Appendix 3. Little 5 approves the movements in earmarked reserves set out in Appendix 4, and little 6 notes the revenue budget reconciliation in Appendix 5. Now, only 2 of these are requests for approval, so we'll just pick up the ones that are noted. So little 1, little 2, little 3, and little 6. Are we happy to note those? Are we happy to note? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Then we'll just pick up little 4 and little 5, which requires approval. So I so move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stilts. Can we agree by assent? Those? No. Okay, well in that case, then, no, that's fine. We won't agree by assent, so we have a vote then. So those in favour, can you put your hand up, please? Those against? Okay, thank you very much. Carried. Okay, thank you very much. We move on. Agenda item 9, fees and charges schedule 2026-27. This can be found on pages 45 to 64. And again, Mr. J, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is in some ways a very simple report and in some ways a very complicated report. It's made complicated particularly by the subject matter and the fact that there is an awful lot of different lines in the appendices. And the simple aspect of the report is that it's important early on in the budget process to get a view as to what the uprated fees and charges are likely to look like in terms of the individual tariffs. The committee received at its last meeting a consideration of some of the overarching, more strategic, if I can put it this way, or policy considerations around fees and charges. And it's worth noting that within that, the discussion was very much around there is a tariff, there is then a volume of uptake against that tariff, and that's the amount that the council receives in terms of incomes. So in the same vein, looking at the report that you have in front of you, and if I can refer you to the impact on budgets and section 4 in the table, paragraph 4.1, what we can see there is that the 25-26 budget in the current year, as previously approved in February, set a target of overall incomes of around 4.4 million. Within that, off-street car parking, including Promenade Park car park, at 1.6 million, and waste management at 1 million, and then development control at just under 1 million. You can see that just those 3 lines at the top, they cover the vast amount of the impact on the council's budgets. That's not to say that charges included in, for example, the other category or taxi licensing, hackney carriages, etc., and rivers, areas like that. It's not to say that those are not important. They are important, but actually in terms of the materiality of the overall budget setting process, hopefully this table gives some indication as to how that's performing. In a similar way, the second column of numbers in the table sets out the current forecast, and the current forecast is that we're performing slightly better than was anticipated at the time of setting the budget for the current year. You can see that the overall variance is about 129,000 higher at the current time. The budgeted income for next year has been based on review with service areas and updates to a number of the areas, and that's set out in much more detail in the appendix to the report. That's suggesting that the budgeted income is likely to move based on a number of different pieces of analysis which underpin that, from the current budgeted level of 4.3 million to a revised budgeted level for next year of 4.5 million, or 4,451,000 overall. There's quite a lot of detail within that, and even more detail within the appendix, which is set out from page 49 of the pack as Appendix A. What I would say briefly about the details in the appendix, what we tried to do is draw the link between the levels of the different charges and the way the different charges are being applied moving from year to year, and the overall budgetary expectations. So taking the top of page 49, I hope members can follow through, obviously planning and environmental services and environmental health. The environmental health fees and charges, or environmental protection elements of fees and charges, the expectation is £8,800. And there's then a list, a considerably large list of a range of different fees and charges, which are expected to yield around about £8,800 of income. And that stretches down much of that first page until we get to food safety and hygiene, and the budget expectation there is £5,700. There's an awful lot of detail. The point really is there is a lot of time between now and finalising these charges, which will be brought forward in January and February, during which time members and officers will be able to work further and talk through whether these charges are being set at, we think, the right level or not the right level. But from my perspective, in trying to set the budget for 26-27, it's important to get that early view as to how those fees and charges might look going forward. So this is an update for the committee on that process of discussing with officers in particular, but now there's also the opportunity to discuss with members, but also trying to keep that sense of focus around the different aspirations that we have, both around individual engagements with individual residents, but also the need to set the overall budget for the council as we move towards 2026-27 financial year. So hopefully that gives some explanation as to why this is both a simple and a complex report. I think that the important point here is that if there are areas that members would be keen to see further review around, there's lots of different ways in which we can achieve that and time through which that can be achieved. But it gives us a planning basis which we can now obviously share with members in terms of how the overall incomes can be played into the budget planning for the coming financial year. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jay. Any questions? Councillor Lagan.
Shows I read everything, doesn't it? So, and thank you for the report. I really like the fact that you actually highlight what the expectation is from all of the data, rather than have to sit there and whack it into a spreadsheet and try it myself. The only thing I'm very pleased that there's one hotspot that I always zoom in on that seems to have actually been realised to a sensible, sustainable figure. But the thing I'm worried about, there's 34 price on applications. So there's a lot. Yeah, if you're budget setting and you've put some sums about this, take on page 54, fun fairs and circuses, budget expectation 79,400, but all of that is POA. So to get that budget expectation, you must have had an idea, or must have an idea of what each of the line items actually are. It just concerns me that there's 34 of them. So if we're getting to the level of detail where the devil is in that detail that you want, wouldn't it be better if we actually fixed what these actually are? One of my bugbears, and I don't know if anybody else feels the same way, is fun fairs and circuses. poster removal deposit. Now, Cortex Circus come to Maldon every year. I don't know if you go, they're brilliant, and they take their posters down. You know, but you see other people smack them on. If there was a significant sum of deterrent that was as part of a contract, that might help raise two sides, raise some revenue and also raise a punitive action if people are not doing what they need to do. So it's just, there seems to be a lot of them, Mr. J. 34 seems to be quite a considerable number without knowing exactly how much things are. And we have the budget expectations highlighted. So please don't take that as a criticism. That's just a confusion in my old grey head.
Mr. J, happy to respond.
Thank you, Councillor Lagan, for the question. I think it's a really good question. I think it highlights an important area around this. Again, referring back to the policy discussion around recovery of costs for fees and charges. The point around fees and charges, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of making sure that we manage public money in an effective way, we're not seeking to make a surplus. What we're seeking to do is to recover the costs the council incurs arising from certain activities. For some of those activities, it's very easy to identify exactly how to undertake that process. Were we to take something like, I don't know, dropping a curb or something like that, it's fairly easy to identify what the kind of costs are that will go into that, and then to set a reasonable price and then adjust that year to year, depending on what's happening. If you look at some of these areas where you've quite properly flagged price on application, things like electricity supplies, standpipe installations, those sorts of things, damage deposits and so forth. Many of these items will vary quite considerably from place to place, and depending on the different events which might be put into the council might be wishing to put on in different parts of the council's area. So some of these things around Promenade Park and the service, for example, the circus, for example, some of those things can be identified to an extent, but it's difficult to see exactly because some of the events that are being talked about don't come in lots of easily manageable quantities at known times of the year. For example, these things will change in terms of the appetite for them. Hence why officers have recommended that actually the price is on application there, at which point we'll do a little bit more work, which would be around identifying what do we think the full cost of that is, how do we then recover that full cost from whoever it is that wants to put on one of those events, and then charge appropriately. For most of these charges, we're able to identify that in advance. However, for some of the charges that we're working with, we can look back to previous events, and that's another way that we can look at it in terms of working through the wider budget. The most important point for me is that in terms of the context of the overall budget for the council, these things will tend to balance out in a way which is effective. It's not appropriate, I think, at this stage. We couldn't easily and accurately provide those numbers. They need to be done on an as and when basis. I hope that's clarifying.
It's an answer, but I don't necessarily agree with that answer. And I'll just agree to differ, because I get what you say on some of them, but some of them are very easy to align to what the true costs actually are, and it's an opportunity not for us to make the money, but to ensure that we have a sum of money that people clearly understand. And I understand your point.
Thank you, Councillor Lagan. And I think there is opportunity to revisit some of these. So it's not that this is the end of the discussion about this. It is a point in time, but it is not the end of the discussion. I think Councillor Fittock, then Councillor Pratt, then Councillor Spenceley. So Councillor Fittock first.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to table 4.1, off-street car park, including prom car park, there's about an 8% variance. I'd imagine 160,000 against 1.5. So obviously we've got more income than we forecast we were going to get. That's quite a big deviation, 8%. But then when I look at the budget income 26-27, presumably that's indicative income that you've got at the moment based upon a presumed increase. But is that based upon the 2025-26 budget forecast, budget, or the actual 2025-2026 forecast? Because obviously there's two starting points, isn't there?
Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the question. I think it's an important area. It is something that officers have worked through from a variety of different perspectives. It is difficult to come up with a clear approach in terms of exactly how to work that through. The main considerations are around whether or not the number of spaces will remain the same, the general approach in terms of the areas of ticket sales where there are higher volumes which are coming through, and then understanding the anticipated level of increases to some of the charges and as and when they will be playing through. So there's a large amount of assuming as is, but with an uplift in the charge as and when that will be played through. I think it's an area we can continue to look at, and some of that could change as we consider some of the other elements of the budget. At the moment, that's the estimate that we're working with. I think it's the best estimate that we've got, and in terms of best estimate, that's something which I'm always asking my team and officers across the council to work with to try to come up with, in their view, the best estimate, the estimate from which there will be the least movement. So currently that's the position. Depending on the outturn for this year, it could be necessary to revisit some of that.
Okay, Councillor Pratt, then Councillor Spenceley, and then...
Thank you, Chairman. Page 55, wharfage, visitors pontoons. Could I just have an explanation, Mr. J, through you, Chairman, of what an exclusive use of a pontoon means?
Mr. J?
Interesting question, not one got an immediate answer for, but I'm happy to dig it out and
bottom them up. Yeah, no answer. No.
And I think on, there'll be somewhere we can, ask for some very detailed answers. I think we have an opportunity to revisit these and ask some of the detailed questions subsequently. So you've raised an issue, and I think actually
Sue Green and I have had numerous conversations on exclusive use, but I think I would like it to be mentioned at this meeting, because it does give some concern that for 150 quid a day you can have a whole pontoon. But yes, it just
you've raised it, and it's something that we can go back to. Councillor Spenceley.
Thank you, Chair. Similarly, I hope we can revisit some charges on page 54. I'm still opposed personally to the charges at White Horse on a Sunday, where after 3 hours it goes to an exorbitant amount. I still think whatever strategy we've used as an excuse to put that in place, that it actually affects people very badly. There is a nearby church which is used by quite a lot of elderly people, and actually parking down the hill and walking up isn't great for them. I think it affects the businesses at the top of the high street, and I think we need to review it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor
Siddle. It's going back to the point that Councillor Fittock made on the car parking, if I can find it, and the fact that it's actually going down, but the car park task and finish working group did decide not to increase car parking charges in the new financial year. So is that the reason why there's not the increase?
Councillor, no, Mr. J.
It's one of the factors that we've taken into account, but also considering the likely level of usage and understanding how that's going to work and how the two will play together.
Okay. So, Councillor Legham.
So therefore, picking up what you say, Chair, and what Mr. J says, and what Councillor Spenceley said, the recommendation, because recommendation is quite clear and explicit, and it says that the detailed fees and charges policy are set out in Appendix A be agreed. So we have to agree that it's subject to council approval of the fees and charges policy, which is a policy that we agreed last time. So would you not have to amend that recommendation?
My understanding of this, and I'll look for colleagues to tell me if this is not the case, that this is part of the budget setting process. So assumptions have been made that provides a figure for budget setting purposes, subject to the fees and charges policy that did come through to this committee on the 2nd of October and has still got to be approved by council. So actually there are still processes in train to allow for individual lines and individual fees to be re-looked at. I don't think what we're saying here is that all of those are fixed, as I understand it, because actually there's still the fees and charges policy that is subject to full council approval. So I think it's a starting point, rather than, as I understand it, rather than saying these are the fees and that is it, and we would then have to go back and undo a position if we not were not to agree to this.
Could I come back?
Yes,
Because I
you can.
did approve. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Sill,
Yeah.
just for being patient for a moment. That's not what the recommendation says. That it's a simple matter of a slight adjustment to the recommendation. I think the ML will agree that when you have something that's set, because the fees and charges policy is a policy,
Yep.
and what we're doing here is we're saying the fees and charge schedule as be agreed, subject to that policy. The council can still agree that policy, but if we change the wording just slightly, you could put the detailed fees and charges schedule for 20 as set out appended, subject to minor amendments, be agreed by the council. That gives you the scope to be able to change what's here, because if not, I can't agree to any of that, because some of that might get changed.
Could we just put in noted rather than agreed? Because if
It will need to go to full council
It will,
for proper
yes.
agreement anyway.
Indeed, I understand that. It's just simply, in a sense, you're using this for budget setting purposes, aren't you? So actually, in a sense, you're wanting a figure which you can use as a starting point for budget setting. Sorry, Councillor Stilts and then Councillor Siddle.
Oh, sorry, basically we're looking
Can
at...
you?
Sorry, I was talking to Mr Benjai. If we're looking at that, then what Councillor Lagan's asking for is that we just tweak that recommendation, and I think that's what you're happy to do, so...
Yeah, so I am suggesting and asking really whether rather than agreed, we note it.
No.
No? No. All right, okay. That's fine. Mr. J, did you want to come back?
There's a number of points that have been raised which we can look into, and we can come back with a revised position. As far as I'm concerned, I think that will be still work within the overall framework for the budget.
Yeah, Councillor
I feel slightly bad because I suppose I've been driven by the MOs and the Constitution to be very explicit. So what it says is what it says. We can either do one of two things. We can defer it and not do it now, or what we can do is just change a slight wording that gives the scope for everybody to say, this is basically it, but there might be a couple of tweaks that we need to change, and then Graham, when it goes to council, that can be agreed. It's just a slight change of wording to be constitutionally correct.
Ms. Holmes, are you?
So normally, what we do is we agree the fees and charges at this meeting to go to full council in December, where it is then approved. So we are putting forward at this meeting what is going to be approved in December. So the fees and charges are approved by the council in December before the February meeting, because it can't come back to this committee because the next one of these committees is in January. So that's the normal process that we go through. So what we could do tonight is approve certain ones and then say, okay, these ones we don't want to approve, but will be approved in December when we have a discussion at full council.
Well, so my concern about that
that's
is
the process that we go through.
Well, there is, if that is the approach you were wanting to take, we have loads and loads of lines. Are you really wanting us to agree each line we're going to accept and not agree others?
All we need to do is say which ones are the exception.
I don't, through the chair, I don't think that's the most sensible move.
Okay,
I think to be fair, it would be, and you're right, what we do here, we set it. Yeah. So I'm trying to find a pathway to say that if the detailed fees and charges schedule as a basis A, to be agreed subject to minor amendments, and then to come to full council to be approved along with the fees and charges policy. That gives us the push me button, make those minor amendments. Yeah. But Mr. J knows roughly what he's got in his budget, and then we're only talking tiny tweaks. We know that. But it's important.
Yeah, Mr. Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Lagan here. I think we want to get to a position where we're agreeing the majority of these. I think we agree. I think there's a few minor tweaks that need to be ironed out, as Councillor Lagan says. So I think a slight amendment to the recommendation allows us to go away and work on those ones that have been highlighted, because it doesn't sound like, in the big scheme of how many fees and charges lines there isn't a lot for us to look at to come back with some amendments for that December meeting of council, if the monitoring officers are comfortable with that.
I have no issue with that. The issue that I think you'll need to clarify is how those minor amendments are going to be made. Are they going to be referred to the working group to report back, or is a delegation going to be given the chair officers to make those minor amendments before you get to full council? That's the only clarification. I think to add that recommendation is fine, but you need to say what mechanism those minor amendments are going to be made before the December meeting.
Councillor Leggan, did you want to come back?
Yeah, would it be prudent, have you got the working group meeting again before December? Then it should be the working group. And you're talking about what Councillor Pratt's basically said about clarification of terminology and POAs. I think that's it.
Councillor, Mr. Jacob.
The meeting of the Finance Working Group is currently planned for the 5th of December, and the council meeting is the 11th of December, which makes the timelines difficult. But if members were comfortable with perhaps this being a late item and flagged changes being identified clearly within the report would obviously be, if it was going to go through discussion and agreement through the Finance Working Group and thence be released and published to go into the full council meeting, it wouldn't be able to be published, I suspect, in the normal time frame. So it would be a delayed paper in that respect. But that on its own wouldn't be a reason not to go down that road, so far as I understand it.
Oh, Ms Bird, you're...
Yeah, Chairman, I just wanted to, I'm sure members are aware that obviously this is a recommendation to council, so we wouldn't actually have a separate report at that council meeting. What would normally happen is the recommendation would come forward with the appendix, just to clarify that.
Okay, and the
So the recommendation is what will then be presented to council. So if you're going to put the words minor amendment in that recommendation, that is what will then go to council.
the minor
So
amendment.
I don't know if we need, I don't know if you need a slightly, if you need to cover it by two recommendations. So like a resolution of the committee that they're giving delegation to officers to make final amendments. I don't, it's just to clarify that but it is a recommendation to council. And we don't normally bring it forward as a separate report.
Okay, however, the comment that is being made and is concerning is that there are some lines which members have concerns about, which want to be looked at or need to be looked at because members have concerns about them. So it's just a mechanism for looking at those and then agreeing those particular lines when we agree at the full council meeting. So if we can take that away, look at those lines at finance, and then that be brought back to full council when we're making the decision about fees and charges. Does that satisfy Councillor Spenceley?
Just a slight concern, Chair, with regard to anything regarding car park charges, that wouldn't be through the finance group, would it? It would be through the car park group. So how would that work?
Yes, sorry. Yes, Ms Green.
Thank you, Chair. So we do have a car park charges working group which has met and has made a recommendation. So if members were minded, we would have to pull that group back together again to review the Sunday parking charges.
Yes, yeah, okay. Well, the recommendation that came out of that was that nothing would change and we wouldn't put up any fees. That would be a change to what the recommendation has been from that car parking working group. Councillor Stilts, and then we'll have to find a way through this.
I was thinking about something that Miss Bird said, and could it be that we had a second recommendation put in there? So the recommendation from this group was to look at the minor amendments at the finance working group, and then the recommendation to council is the one that's on there. So there's another recommendation that's brought in to say that basically we're giving it back to the finance working group, but then you're keeping the other recommendation in there.
Yeah, it's.
I think Councillor Stilts is right. Could you do it that because this is Appendix A, could you just put in something that, the delegate fees and charges policy set Appendix A, that is to be reviewed by working group, it comes to the council, because it's just to the council, isn't it?
That one is.
So yeah, so you put two recommendations that it's reviewed by the finance working group, and then that stays the same, because it gives you the scope to review it, and then this, you're not saying what's in here until you've reviewed it. Does that make sense?
Joy, Tara.
Just a thought, if it was a resolution of the committee that the finance working group were to review those particular fees and charges, then potentially you could do a recommendation to council that's subject to the review of those fees and charges by the finance working group, that the detailed schedule be approved. And then if we needed to provide an updated schedule to the council meeting, we could do that.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
it does. That sounds like we have found a way through. No, slightly tortuous, but there we go. Okay, so there's a second recommendation that sits in here. We got, sorry. Oh yes, it's green.
Thank you, Chairman. I might be able to possibly remove one of the queries from this evening. I can reassure Councillor Pratt that the fee that he's referring to is a fee that has been there for many years. I believe the one that he's referring to, which was the additional new charge for last year, which was £1,000, that has been removed. That's not in there. So, yeah, I think that was your question, wasn't it, about the exclusive use? That fee and charge has been in there for many years,
Yeah,
so I can
it's
come
just-
back with a clarification on
Indeed.
that, but it certainly isn't the issue that you're referring to.
Right, Councillor Pratt, I'm just conscious that actually we're now getting into weeds, and in a sense, actually we want to get out of weeds and get to the process.
Chairman, if I may, I think Miss Bird's recommendation to modify it covers everything that we've been talking about. And I understand what Mrs Green is saying, but yes, that was part of my concern. We used to have, or there was discussions to have a significant amount for exclusive use.
Okay, so we're trying to just come up with a proposal here. The detailed fees and charges set out in Appendix A be reviewed by the Finance Working Group.
The second one is subject to that review. The detailed fees and charges, that remains.
Okay.
Does that fit? Would you like me to read that out?
Yes, please.
Chairman, just to clarify, are we asking the working group to review all the fees and charges again, or are they saying there are specific ones? Because that just wasn't clear, sorry.
Yeah, there is an issue about whether we've captured all the fees and charges that are a concern. Now, if actually those that have been raised here are the only ones that actually people have got a concern about, then we've got an opportunity for the Finance Working Group to look at those and assume that the rest we're happy with. Otherwise, if we take the whole lot, we're going to have to go through the whole process.
I think, Chair, the issue with making it that specific is that if you get to that working group and find there's one you've not listed, so I would recommend, although the recommendation will say you can review all of them, you don't obviously in that working group need to go through every single one, but that means you won't have missed any that somebody here has not missed or
and if something
through.
surfaces another one that we need to look at, the opportunity is there. Yeah. Okay, so do you want to? Yes, please.
I'll read this for consideration. So it will be little one. I'll read it slowly, Tara, so hopefully you can type. So it's the detailed fees and charges as set out in Appendix A be reviewed by the Finance Working Group. Then little 2, subject to that review, subject to little 1, that the detailed fees and charges schedule for 2006/27 as set out in Appendix A be agreed subject to council approval of the fees and charges policy. So that's the recommendation to council.
So sorry, Chairman, just to clarify, the first one is a resolution of the committee, the second one is a recommendation to council.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so.
You'll need to agree that with my.
Yes. Okay, so.
I can't propose.
Well, okay, well, I'm happy to propose that wording. Do I have a seconder? I have a seconder. So we'll take those together. So we'll do it by hands. Those in favour, put your hands up. Those against, carried. All right, thank you very much. We got there in the end. So thank you. All right, we move on. So we now move on to agenda item 10. Found on pages 65 to 72, financial year 2026-7 budget and medium-term financial strategy update. Over to you, Mr. J again.
Thank you, Chair. And looking forward to this item in particular after the previous conversation. So this report sets out for the committee the current position around planning for the budgets for next year and the medium-term financial strategy to 28-29. What I'll just do quickly is identify some of the next steps in that process before going through some of the detail of the report, and then obviously moving on to discussion and questions, etc. So officers are looking in more detail at the moment on the various growth bids that have been presented for consideration for next year, and looking at capital funding, capital bids and capital funding, and the forecasts likely to arise on the collection fund. All of that is expected to be presented through to Finance Working Group on the 5th of December, with any queries and updates then coming through to the 5th of January, then looking to reporting through to 29th of January, meeting of this committee, and again 5th of February of this committee before landing with February council for the full council for making the budget and the council tax decision. So the process is still ongoing. This is not a kind of full and final position, but it sets out some of the key aspects of the discussion which have been had, particularly with Finance Working Group. So just in terms of the discussion and the way that is being played through, I wanted in particular just to flag some of the points, particularly in section 4 and section 5, which are more in terms of the positioning and framing of the report, before we get into some of the values which are set out subsequently. So in section 4, looking particularly at the medium-term financial strategy, so that's the strategic aspect of all of this, making sure that the priorities are aligned properly with the current position. So the priorities being raised particularly within the financial provisions for the coming years reflect the wider activities. So some of this is, as it sets out at 4.2, around preparation for local government reorganisation. That can come in lots of different ways, but there's some text there which gives some further analysis as to what that preparation is looking for, and that's a key part of the orientation of the budget. 4.3, it's looking at particularly around delivery and efficiency, and efficiency there we can look at in different ways, but particularly around sort of value for money, value for public money, etc. So can we make sure effectively that the budgets are lined up with whatever the requirements associated with LGR might be? Can we also make sure that we are continuing to deliver clearly, focusing on the things that we are delivering and taking focus away from any areas where it's not delivering the things that we need or want to do in the coming years? And then within all of that, making sure we've got that efficiency position working through effectively. 4.4 picks up funding and 4.5 picks up the use of reserves, and these are two things which go together, and it's been the subject of some discussion at Finance Working Group, and it's important to explain the position here. So we actually received today the statement on the local government funding policy for the coming financial year 26-27, but also it's the government has confirmed its commitment to a 3-year settlement approach. And in line with that, what we're seeing is that there is likely to be, particularly for some districts, particularly for districts like Maldon, a substantial reduction in the level of funding available to the council from government in the coming years. There's a number of reasons behind the government's thinking, but basically the modelling that's been undertaken already at national level and the guidance that's been issued to 151s in different councils has indicated, as passed through by officers at MHCLG, districts may see funding fall by up to 10% and then flat cash. So a 10% fall going into 26-27 and then flat cash for the last 2 years of the settlement. There's a number of ways in which that can affect us, and there's a number of ways in which the council can cope with that. So just to work through what that might mean, part of the options for that, and this came up on a call with MHCLG just in the last few days, discussion of how, for example, the grant relating to extended producer responsibility could be used to help offset some of that. It's not a ring-fence grant. There is scope for the council to use that in different ways. Pensions liabilities in different ways can be worked through, and we touched on pensions liabilities previously. The pension liability for the council in previous years has indicated a likely deficit in terms of the balance between liabilities and the assets of the council held for the specifically Maldon element of the Essex LGPS. That's now much more in balance. There are options around that, but they need to be treated with great care. There's also options around reserves, and I think that this point around the use of reserves is of fundamental importance. It has been made clear both through the Fair Funding 2.0 consultation and in other documents. Government is content that actually, particularly moving towards reorganisation, district councils such as Maldon may wish to use reserves. Wish is an interesting word in that context. I think they're pushing in that direction. So in the context of a likely substantial cut, we don't know the detail until we see the detail, and we won't see the detail until the week of the 15th of December. So we're expecting a 16th of December, 17th of December date-ish for the publication of the provisional settlement. That's when we'll know more detail about how that works for the council. We can take a view in which we say we need to keep a balance in the base budget, and if we keep a balance in the base budget, what that means is we need to take substantial funding out of the current budgets. So what we would need to do to retain a balance in the base budget would be to cut services, to cut staffing, to cut services in the way that the council has done before. However, there is an alternative to that, which really comes through partly as a result of the backstop position, which is now created through local government reorganisation. We don't know quite what will happen in terms of reorganisation. We don't know exactly when we will hear more, but we're thinking that there will be some kind of indication as to the future outlook, probably March, April, May time next year. There'll be some indication coming through as to what that's going to look like and where government is minded to place Maldon in the wider context of a reorganised set of councils in Essex. When we move towards that, the funding will change again. So whatever we choose to do, whatever the councillors are minded to support in terms of financial policies going forwards, there will be a fundamental change that happens when Maldon Council ceases to exist and a unitary council is brought into place. So there is an option in which we can do what the council has done in previous years, which is to maintain that kind of fiscal balance in the base budget. But that is likely to mean that we reduce services, and some of the money which could arise through some of this still ends up increasing our reserves position, which is already a strong position. So the alternative that was discussed through the Finance Working Group was to say, well, in a targeted and measured way, we can apply reserves in order to maintain services at a level which is similar to the level that they're at the moment. And then as and when a new unitary comes through and there's changes in terms of the way services are provided for residents, currently residents of Maldon Council, but in the future residents of a future council, well, that's something that they're going to need to fix under all circumstances. And we can't second guess what that's going to be. Therefore, the outcome of the consideration in recent months through the Finance Working Group was along the lines of, yes, can we explore the opportunity to deploy reserves through the coming 2 financial years leading up to the expected date of reorganisation in order that we preserve services for local people in an effective way. We don't need to take substantial amounts of funding out of our pay and non-pay budgets. We don't need to force the position around income generation. We can hold a position as it stands by applying reserves without touching the core reserve, again, which has already been talked about within this meeting. So the approach around this is to consider how we apply those reserves in a way which keeps a safe, sustainable position for the council, and modelling through not just 26-27 but also 27-28 with the view that we understand in more detail what the position looks like at the point we believe of the change into the new reorganised world of councils in Essex. The MTFS position has also been worked through to include the year 28-29, which arguably is outside the horizon. Maldon won't exist at that point. But it's prudent to do that because then it means that if there is a delay to the implementation of reorganisation, we will know what it is that the council is working with, and we can ensure that we land in a safe position to be able to deal with that. Alternatively, we will also know if we're working towards reorganised Greater Essex, we know what for Maldon we're passing across to a successor authority. So it works from both of those perspectives. So that consideration is different to what you might have heard in prior years. As CFO, as 151, I wouldn't normally say, well, let's look at the reserves, let's look at use of reserves, and let's look at use of reserves possibly in a more generous way than perhaps we would normally do. But it makes sense, given that wider strategic context. From my perspective, there's ways of managing that to ensure that we continue to deliver value for public money and the responsibilities around stewardship of public funds, etc. But also from a councillor perspective, I hope that gives an opportunity to think through, well, actually, what is it that we want to do in the coming couple of years, and what is it that we want to plan through? So hopefully that the narrative in the report and what I've just taken you through gives some clarity over the thinking which is emerging around this. Section 4.6 around budgetary transparency. This feels like I'm perhaps trying to set out something or to correct something which is in some ways incorrect in the current scheme of things. That's not the case. In due course, we will be moving forward to LGR, and others will be looking over our shoulders and asking why you did this, why you did that. So this is an opportunity to try and make sure, given that I'm the last in quite a long line of change around the 151s and deputy 151s, and therefore there are some changes which have happened, and sometimes in some areas a lack of clarity over exactly how the priorities of the council financially are being worked through. This is an attempt simply to work through a set of kind of baseline approaches that we can apply to make sure that we all understand each other. So hopefully those comments explain how the strategic side of the MTFS is coming together, and that's section 4. Section 5 then looks at an MTFP, the medium-term financial plan, which effectively is taking some of those principles and showing how they would play through into the numbers, into the values. So figure 1 picks up some of that change. So the overall resources drop between 25-26 and 26-27. You can see from just over 13 million, which was the original budget in 25-26, dropping to below that by a couple of 100,000. The CSP grant, the core spending power grant, is expected based on this model to drop from about 6 million to about 5.5 million. So there's 500,000 of funding lost. That's on top of the tariff, which is already applied as part of the settlement funding assessment. And the tariff is applied at the level of about 5 million. So we're substantially above where the government thinks we should be in terms of the resources we're able to generate locally, hence the way that government policy is applied in terms of financial management. Council tax is expected to go up, as it says at the table above. Council tax charge is expected to go up for the 2.99%, which was largely confirmed, although not absolutely, in today's publication from government. Council tax-based growth has been running at around about 1%, and working that through into those figures, you can see that some of the reduction in core spending power is offset by an increase in council tax. Turning to the expenditure side, setting out at figure 2, there's an expectation based on, if you like, business as usual. So the changes in terms of delivering business as usual would mean that the base budget, currently 13.1 million, would need to increase by about 700,000 to about 13,748 as it sets out at figure 2. And you can see that within that there's more substantial growth around staffing and also goods and services. Some of the changes in the incomes around office and depots and fees and charges are also shown in that table. So overall, expecting that the budget will grow by about 5%, simply accommodating the inflationary pressures of price inflation, changes to fees and charges and inflationary uplifts there, but also pay inflation as that plays through. Some savings are set out at figure 3. These aren't savings which are relating to reductions in services. These are savings which arise from some of the changes that have happened since the previous MTFS. For example, adjustments in the revenue cost of capital provision, the point made earlier by Councillor Fittock around the pensions provision, the ability to move the future provisions around that were previously played into the MTFS, and the extended producer responsibility, the grant which is unring fence, which can be applied in different ways, or alternatively can be applied more generally against waste activities, with the benefit being taken out of the base budget and used alternatively. There's also benefits associated with the council tax pooling which takes place across Essex, and it's the only pool of its kind in the country which can be played through in that way based upon the known figures around staffing to support overall tax collection, and also the gain share based on previous years. So there's a substantial amount there which can also help offset future growth areas. Looking at figure 4, it starts to bring together an overall picture as to what the gap might be. The gap, you can see line 9 there at the bottom, considering the comparison between this and the February 2025 MTFS, which also included the application of reserves. The line at the bottom in the February 2025 MTFS was the gap to be funded by the general fund balance. These numbers have changed, but they have not changed substantially. It's a similar profile. It's slightly reduced in terms of the overall pressure. So it is a consistent position in many respects, and is starting to absorb the position which we're seeing through the likely settlement, which, as I say, is going to come through in December. Part 6 of the report starts looking at some key areas of uncertainty. It's worth considering these because these will need to be contained within the budgetary framework which is being proposed. We already know that there are a number of services experiencing significant challenges in recruitment. Some of these are particularly to do with planning and building control, because some of the rules have changed in there, and it's actually some of the ways in which that market is now working makes it preferential for candidates to be interim rather than permanent candidates. They just get a better rate. Those sorts of changes are having quite a big impact on recruitment across all councils, but including this council. Therefore, simply budgeting for a permanent staff establishment is insufficient. There needs to be a recognition that in some areas it's quite likely that we will need to pay interim rates, and therefore there will be a premium to be budgeted for. So there's areas of uncertainty. As LGR approaches, and staff right across Essex and other areas which are commutable into or out of Essex, what we will see is quite a lot of movement in officers. That could be positive, that could also be adverse. So it's worth bearing in mind that in terms of some of the areas of uncertainty, the actual cost of staffing going forwards could be quite a difficult one to estimate. It's not simply the case that we'll set up a structure, agree the structure, and then recruit into the structure. In some areas, it could be really difficult to recruit and we need to pay a premium. In other areas, that might not be so much the case. And that could shift quite substantially as we go through the coming years. The government funding is also uncertain. We're seeing greater certainty on that. To be honest, directors of finance very usually at this time in the year will say it's all very uncertain. It is quite uncertain until we see the detail of the provisional settlement in mid-December. Once I've got sight of that, I think we'll see a great deal more around how that's all going to be playing through. Having said that, in terms of government funding, we need to be cautious also about the business rates reset, which could have quite a big impact on some aspects of the funding which falls to the council in the future. And the last point is just to bear in mind that around the adoption of the local plan, this is a priority to ensure that this is properly set through and adopted, and there's some changes to the requirements around that which could have an additional budgetary impact. So making sure that we've got sufficient to fund that appropriately through the coming years is another area of consideration. Overall, my initial concern around this was if we were to take a different approach to protect services, to deploy reserves in a targeted, managed way, how does that look? And how does that look if by the time we get to March 2028, the table at figure 5 models through a variation on what this might look like. It is an adverse model. This is not quite as bad as I think it could get, but it is definitely an adverse model. I would expect that this model could be made substantially better. The key point for me is that the bottom right-hand number at 6.3 million is substantially above what the council has previously regarded as being a safe level, and the level previously discussed with finance, or just recently discussed with Finance Working Group. So the approach of accepting that the base budget goes out of balance, accepting some application of reserves in order to ensure services for local people are maintained, possibly even improved. That approach does not leave us in a situation where we're unsustainable. It is a safe position for us to go to. Actually, I'm expecting the position, once we work it through in the coming weeks, and the further discussions with Finance Working Group, I'm expecting that 6.3 to be considerably higher because of the way the figures have been put together. So the conclusion is set out at 8.1. The point here is really to try to ensure that the process through which I work through with the finance team, the process through which I work with the senior leadership team, the chief exec, the process of working with the chair of this committee, Councillor Driver also chairing Finance Working Group, members of the Finance Working Group, members of this committee, that there is an alignment around the overall priorities and principles that are being applied. You're probably getting a bit tired of my voice. Apologies for that. I hope that makes sense, and I'm really happy to take questions on the paper. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Fittock.
I can see you getting 2020 to 6.3 by 2028, but I think there needs to be consideration about what happens if there's a 1 year delay or a 2 year delay in this happening. So although that's sustainable, I think probably if you go 1 year further, it probably won't be. So that's pretty close to the line. I mean, I think I'd just like to say there's lots of options to juggle money around in the budgets, and I would like to think we keep our disciplines, and EPR is really there to offset costs of waste. I think we also have to have consideration, the whole point of EPR is to reduce waste, so you might likely find in due course of time that recycling amounts go down and you get less revenue from that. That's the whole point of it. So I think we need to keep our shape. In terms of staff, there is a great danger that, you know, we just lose complete control over our staff costs. And how you deal with that, I think it's up to you. But the danger of having temporary budgets is that they get set extremely high, and then the department heads say, well, we're actually within budget, but that's because they seriously over forecast the cost in the first place. So in some ways it's better to have the understanding that there'll need to be a variance if those resources can't be hired on a full-time basis, because that's just what happens. But I think it's a bit dangerous setting high budgets for staff costs based on temporary workforce that often doesn't get filled because they'd rather say I'm a little bit under budget than fill the position. So I think we've just as members got to be understanding of the situation, that we know there are problems with planning officers, we know there are problems with enforcement officers, and we said at a previous meeting, we'd rather that the staff are hired on a temporary basis on contract rather than it not be done. So I think that we've really got to keep our shape, I think, and be honest. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? I would just refer to 5.4, those figures there about ongoing savings. As I understand it, these have been available in previous years but have just not been recognised. Am I right in my understanding that where we're trying to get to is a more realistic budget position, so that we so actually when we start seeing figures, they are sitting behind those are not other figures that we're not aware of, because actually we've dealt with them but not up front, which is what we're doing with these figures in 5.4. Is that correct?
I think it's a really important point, Chair. I'm happy to pick that up. I think I'd be very cautious about suggesting that previous budgets weren't in some way correct. I don't think they were.
Sorry, if I say I'm not trying to suggest they're
absolutely not.
It's just how you present them.
It's how they're presented, and I think the budgets in prior years have been presented in a particular way, and people occupying the 151 hot seat have been presenting things, knowing certain things about how their pressures were playing through for the authority and what other resources there could be on hand. I think it's important for this committee to understand, obviously, extended producer responsibility, that was new. I think that came through new for this year. And there's some of the rules around that which are still being worked through with government, and I'm waiting to see the detail of the settlement to understand how that will play through. We have heard recently it will continue to play through at about the level that we've got, but the numbers haven't yet been confirmed. There is an expectation on the part of government, both that it will be fully applied against waste, but also that it will be fully applied. And there's nuance in there in terms of how best to secure that position. Pension, that is new. That is not something which has been is a substantial change to prior budget proposals, except to the extent that we don't need to close the pension gap in the same way as has been the case in previous years. And the revenue cost of capital is an adjustment based on a more detailed review of some of the interactions between capital budgets and revenue budgets. In terms of council tax, then the Essex-wide pool, that has been in place for a number of years. There has been a degree of uncertainty in previous years around exactly what the benefit relating to that might be and when it might be received, and the staffing amount has changed. I think there are complexities to this, and I don't think it's as easy as saying that this is simply correcting, but I think what I'm seeking to do, and as I said, in terms of the wider strategies, to make sure that I'm being clear with officers and I'm being clear with members around exactly the resources available to the council as we move towards reorganisation. That's what I'm trying to do here. So I'm really trying to clear it all out and make sure it's all on the table. So the decisions taken for the next 2 years are done on the basis of all the available facts and all of the available funding being available, so that we can then work through how does that get translated into the expenditure budgets. I hope that clarifies. It is a difficult area though, but thank you for raising the point.
Okay, any other questions? No. Okay, well, we go to the recommendations then that can be found on page 65. That the committee, a little one, reviews the underlying assumptions for the 2026-27 budget, and secondly, notes the update to the medium-term financial strategy 26-27 and 27-28. I think this is just for noting, so are we happy to note? Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, we move on then. Agenda item 11, which can be found on pages 73 to 76, transfer of allotments, Brickhouse Farm, Maldon. And I think this is over to you, Ms Holmes, to take us through this report.
Thank you, Chair. Slightly lighter agenda item after the previous one. So you'll see the report before you tonight, members. The District Council received a request from the Town Council requesting the transfer of the allotments at Brickhouse Farm over to their ownership. There is a plan attached with the report if you're unaware of the site of the allotments. The council owns the land at Brickhouse Farm and has done for some time. The allotments, however, have been managed by the Town Council for a number of years. The Town Council deal with all the maintenance, the water, the charging of the allotment holders, and manage that site on our behalf. The council, District Council maintain the verges around the site, but the Town Council manages the site. We obtain no income as a District Council from this, because the income raised by the allotment holders goes directly to the Town Council, and we hold it as the freeholder and have no obligations to deal with any of the issues that may appear on the site. The Town Council obviously has the experience of managing and maintaining the site, and transferring the ownership to the Town Council will ensure that it stays in their control for the future benefit of the Maldon community. as a point in terms of future use, there is a restriction on that land that says the land can only be used for allotments, and because it includes the wider area of Brickhouse Farm community use, that restriction will remain on the land as it is transferred over. So there'll be no risk for any development outside of what is currently there for that use. And that is the proposal. As with previous transfers, we have to have a nominal amount for it to be legally binding, and the consideration, as in line with previous transfers to district councils, has been set in the recommendation at £1. But I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Members? Councillor Lagan. Oh, sorry, then Councillor Stilts.
Councillor Stilts had her hand up quicker than me.
Sorry?
Councillor Stilts had her hand up quicker than
Yes,
I.
apology, Councillor Stilts, you're first.
Thank you very much. I actually welcome this. I did used to have an allotment on this site, so I will declare that. But that was a few years ago. I actually welcome this. I think this gives the allotment holders more security, and I think as the town council have been maintaining it to a very high standard over the past years, I think that this is a really brilliant idea, and I would propose that we accept this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lagan.
I don't need to say anything else, thank you.
Okay. Any others?
I was just seconding.
Okay, so I will just go to the recommendations then. So the recommendations can be found on page 73. I'll read these out. Recommendations little 1, that the committee agrees for the council to transfer Brickhouse Farm allotments, including all associated access points, gates, fencing and allotment boundary hedgerows, to Maldon Town Council for consideration of £1. And secondly, little 2, that a restriction is placed on the land to ensure that any future use is only for the use of allotments and no commercial development of the land can take place. These restrictions are already in place against Maldon District Council title ownership and will be transferred. So those are the recommendations. That's been recommended by Councillor Stilts, seconded by Councillor Spenceley. So can we agree by assent? Agree. Thank you very much. Okay, and we move on. So agenda item 12. So agenda item 12 can be found on pages 77 to 80. Special event performance funding 2025. Head of Economic Development, Ms. Cable, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. In October 2025, tentative meetings took place with the agent of a national artist, performance artist, who has an affiliation to the area. There was a proposal for a performance to take place on Sunday the 7th of June 2026, which would make use of the existing infrastructure in place for Saltasia, which occurs on Saturday the 6th of June. Utilising the setup in this way would minimise disruption across other weekends and maximise the outlay for the existing infrastructure that's available. Members may be aware the council has worked with the Saltasia production team for 5 years and has a very strong relationship. In 2024, Saltasia attracted 12,215 attendees, 58% of which did not reside in the district and were classed as day visitors. An additional 29% were classed as overnight visitors, as they reside outside the county and likely extended their visit. Therefore, meaning in total 87% of people travelled from outside Maldon district to attend the event. The Yearly Economic Impact of Tourism Report 2024 for Maldon states the following impact of visitor expenditure attributed to each visitor type, and that's worked out by spend times day visitor as £45.41 and spend times overnight visitor is £146.95. This model is derived from the Cambridge Economic Impact Model, which is under licence by Destination Research Limited and whose reports we receive on a yearly basis, and is the reports that are modelled across Essex. Based on that model, those attending Saltasia alone contributed £842,886.46 to the economy of Maldon. Officers recognise the cost of such an artist performance will be significantly more than previous acts we've engaged with. We would support the approach to underwrite 50% of the event costs up to the value of £45,000, but it is expected for this to be paid back in full via ticket sales. Any surplus income will be divided 50-50 with the Council and Saltasia production team. And the maximum capacity for the venue, so the anticipated total number of tickets available, is 14,000. Based on the number of tickets available, the event will have a potential economic return to the district of £965,346.20. In addition to the share of the ticket sales, so should any surplus be available, the council will also benefit from increased income from managed parking for the event. An event of this type provides an excellent opportunity for the council to deliver a high-profile artist to its residents and visitors. A commitment to underwriting 50% of the event costs ensures that discussions can continue with the artist management team and further develop detailed plans. Acknowledging it is not guaranteed, it is likely that the underwritten costs will be recouped either in full or extremely close to the £45,000 commitment. This will be dependent on ticket sales and on secondary spend such as managed parking. But by being directly involved, the council will have a greater opportunity to influence the ticketing price structure and concessionary rates available for Maldon District residents. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms Cable. Questions? Councillor Lagan.
It's very important, the 20p, that yeah, I think it's a real a feather in our cap. I think artists are very, very expensive, especially modern day artists. They charge exceedingly large amounts. And we had a local artist, someone who started to make it quite good, and come down and just do a few bits in Chelmsford, in Maldon, down the amphitheatre and stuff like that. And it was swamped, and it was just, even the High Sheriff got pushed into the middle. So it was a fantastic event. So personally, I think this is a real great community initiative that is incredibly low risk, because Saltasia brings that in. That economic income to the district is a factual sum of money. You can feel it. We will have a small amount of resistance because Park Drive residents and Meadway and Fitchers Crescent, those people are impacted. I suppose I should declare that my dad lives on Meadway and he's deaf, so it doesn't matter. But I'm really, really happy to support something that's innovative, fresh, and can bring smiles and joy to people. So I'm more than happy to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Fiddick and then Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I agree with Councillor Lagan. I'm a great believer. If you're going to do something, do it well. And if getting a headline out, it gives us more visibility, attracts more attention. Additionally, that's an absolute positive thing to do. So I fully support it.
Okay, Councillor Pratt.
We do have history where we have failed, and I think members need to be very fully aware that this 45,000 could be throwaway. The report reads very, very positive. Great report, thank you. However, there is another side to that coin. If it rains and people don't come, we do run a very big risk, as we have done in the past, of losing all that money. I'd like to counterbalance that with the report would have been better for me had it included what the likely extra revenue from car parking and whether we actually charge for the venue. Because going 50-50 with the promoter gains half the profits, we gain half of it, of which we've got to pay for our venue. And I'm not sure within the report that it actually says we charge for the venue. So I think my underline is, would the promoter not go ahead if we don't provide the 45k?
Ms Cable, do you want to come back, and then I'll bring in Councillor Fiddick and then Councillor Lay.
Thank you, Councillor Pratt. So essentially, the request from this report is almost twofold. We're saying, please, allow us to have these discussions with the artist agent and the promoter so that we can undertake that work, which needs to be completed to negotiate fees. And that's why it's up to 45,000. That's not specifically the artist fee. And I do apologise to members for the secrecy around, but I'm sure you can understand there's sensitive conversations being had. But that's why we've requested that figure and not specifically put on it, because it gives us some leverage with various mechanisms we need to put in place to ensure the event is a success. And also with regards to our direct involvement, as 4.3 states, it helps us negotiate that ticketing price structure. We don't want an Oasis situation where it's dynamic pricing. We want to be able to influence that, and obviously for the benefit of the residents as well, who will be, Councillor Lagan's very correct, who will be impacted by this, and we will try and mitigate that as much as possible. So the costs with the car parking, etc., fees, that will all be part of this dialogue, which hopefully the committee will agree tonight that we can continue to have, but at least say to the agent, we're on board, let's have discussions seriously.
I'll bring the others in a minute. Can I just clarify, because we have had an event on the Sunday in the past. We didn't this last year. So in a sense, the setup is all there. It wasn't used this year. We're now just looking to use it. Otherwise it sits there empty, which is what happened essentially this year, isn't it? And that seems to be a good use of it if we can get it right. But there we go. Let's see. Councillor Fittock and then Councillor Lay.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I understand the concerns from Councillor, but it could be a rainy day and it all blows out. I mean, I've had that as a parish councillor. Now we put on a great big event. We thought we'd go really big, have it all day and all evening. Allocated about 10% of our precept to it, and it rained all day. No one turned up. I mean, in the scheme of things, looking at £45,000 against the council income, it's an insignificant amount. So I really do think it's a risk worth taking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lay, and then Councillor Siddle.
Yes, thank you very much. It's sort of a bit mixed from myself, just reading through the paper. I think speaking to what Councillor Lagan mentioned was obviously that this is good to promote what we do within the town and promote our area. I found just a few points there, and picking up on Mr. Jay's points earlier about value for public money. This is public money being used to do this for a private potentially event, and obviously we're stepping in, as Councillor Pratt said, into the territory of being the promoter who normally funds and deals with the artists, and we could get burnt with this. In a financial climate where it is challenging to be seen to spend this money, has to be justified in what we're doing. So therefore, underwriting and expecting, surely there should be some more definition around that, around ticket sales. If we get to 2,000 tickets, this is what we would look to charge. 3,000 tickets, we would look to recoup our money, and maybe even to receive some money should they reach a maximum level of ticketing. The numbers involved, if we're talking about 14,000 capacity and we're looking at £30 a ticket, it's quite, it's £420,000. Obviously, if we get to 2/3 level, there's quite a considerable amount of money coming in. So our money should come back if it is an artist of stature, come back to us. So I think I found it a little bit woolly around these issues, and I'm just concerned about value for money impacting on the community. Obviously, has been touched on. Parking fees, we would receive the parking fee anyway, so to be paid back out of our parking fee seems we should be receiving it just directly out of ticket sales. So there should be a direct equivalency for ticket sales to the money back. I don't have a problem in principle with it, but I just think it needs to be much clearer and rather than less abstract in what we're actually looking to do. So there's a more defined response from the promoters. Yeah. Thank you.
I'll bring you in, but can I? Yes, sorry. Yes, Mr. Butcher, do you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Siddle.
Yes,
I think first of all on the promotion, we would leave that largely to the production team at Saltasia. But I think where we would have an input into it, and I think where it could be, significant for the local residents, is we can have a say over the ticket sales and ticket prices. Something Leander and I have discussed is around making sure that we have tickets available free of charge for low-income families in the district, that we set prices at an affordable rate for residents with a Maldon district postcode. We want to make this an event for Maldon people that's affordable for the majority. And we've run a few different scenarios on what the income likes on 4,000, 5,000, etc. But we haven't set that pricing strategy yet. We're looking at a range of options. But what's key for this is that it's a community event for the people of Maldon. Yes, there will be visitors from outside the district, but we want to make this as appealing to our residents as possible. So there is work that's gone on behind the scenes and further work, but at the moment we just want to have those continue the discussions with the agents, the artist agent, so that we can hopefully secure the booking, and then we can get into a bit more detail on that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Siddle.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think we need to focus upon is this is a local artist, so to a certain extent we should target the local audience if at all possible. I know that's going to be quite difficult, but yeah, trying to target that. Yeah, we are. People aren't turning up on the day. They're buying tickets in advance. So if it rains, like it did this year at Saltasia, you get wet, and you choose whether you want to go or how. And it was unfortunate this year with Saltasia because it was absolutely pouring down. And yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people did leave early, which was a bit of a shame. So yeah, there's not a risk if we get this right, and we're doing the pre-sales, so we're not selling tickets on the day. In terms of that element of risk, I think this is a fantastic opportunity that we need to look at, and if we can make it as local as possible, then that would be a huge benefit.
Councillor Lagan, I'll let you come back, and then.
I'd love Oasis. Have a bonus if you can do that because you get a roll with it. But I think from what I'm gleaning from the way that the report is written, is that this is a significant artist, and I think if you look at festivals in places like Glastonbury, they're off the scale. It pours, but if you get the right person, the right peg in the right square, people will come and stay for that. And what sold it to me as well was the locality. And because we are doing exactly what Mr. Butcher has said and what Councillor Siddle's reinforced, we're doing something locally and we're actually looking at it, which is music to my ears. So I get completely what Councillor Lay says, fully understand as the ward member for that area as well. But I reiterate, I think it's something that I don't think we've done. It's the risk appetite from my perspective it's tiny. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, so I'll read the proposal then. The recommendation that members agree to allocate 45,000 to allow detailed event planning and secure the headline act for a special event performance in 2026. So I'm happy to propose. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stilts, thank you. Can we agree by assent? Thank you. Okay. On to agenda item 13, then any other items of business that the chair decides are urgent. We have one item which was circulated as a supplement. So 13A, business rates pooling 2026-27, expression of interest. This can be found on pages 3 to 4 of the supplementary pack. And Mr. Jay, this is over to you again.
Thank you, Chair. This is a lot less interesting than the previous item. I apologise. It's similar to the rural settlement item, which was earlier on in the agenda. It is just to request support from members to put in an expression of interest to MHCLG to be part of a business rates pool in Essex for 26-27 in a similar way to the participation of this council in business rates pools in recent years, subject to the detail of the rules around business rates pooling, which are expected to come forward alongside the provisional local government financial settlement in mid-December. So we have to put in an expression of interest now by the 24th. This seems to be a good opportunity. Perhaps it should have been picked up earlier and gone out as part of the main agenda pack. Apologies for that. I think the issue really is to get the support to progress in the normal way, subject to the normal checks, which are what are the new rules, and actually we have a degree of confidence that the that this would be something which would be beneficial. The final decision will not be taken until full council in February. So it's just to put in the expression of interest.
Okay, any questions? Hang on, Councillor Lagan.
Sorry, I will be very quick. I know. What's the risk if we don't do it? Because there's scatter risk in there, but we don't. It's a pooling, isn't it? So, but if it increases rates, we get half of it, don't we? So what happens to that other pool, that other part? So what's the risk?
The simple answer to the question is that the council has benefited to the tune of 150,000 plus in previous years as a result of being part of the pool, and we wouldn't have been able to achieve that otherwise. So the risk is that we lose the opportunity to secure additional income.
Okay, I don't get a sense there's a lot of questions other than that one, unless anybody else wants to leap up. No. Okay, so on page 3 of the supplementary pack, the recommendation that the expression of interest to participate in the business rates pool in Essex in 2026-27 to be submitted to government be approved pending the decision of the council in February 2026. I'm happy to propose. We have a seconder, Councillor Stilts. Can we agree by assent? Thank you very much. And we move on to agenda item 14, closure of the meeting. So remember, thank you for your contributions, and I now draw the meeting to a close at 9:15. Thank you.